Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. So today we're gonna talk about math in Cobra fucking Kai. And I am excited, if you could not tell. Cobra Kai is an excellent show. Dope as hell. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's part of the larger Karate Kid franchise, if you didn't already know that. And with that in mind, we're going to be talking about a lot of things Cobra Kai. And so, spoilers ahead for that and Karate Kid as a whole. Here's how this video is going to go. I'm going to talk about Cobra Kai. I'm going to focus in on the fighting, and I'm also going to extend that to just like fighting in general, but also how it relates to the show and the philosophies expressed in the show, as well as like more meta elements. And we'll talk about these things and more. So again, spoilers ahead. Let's fucking go. Okay, so yeah, Cobra Kai is an excellent show. Like I said, it's 65 episodes spread out over 6 seasons in 7 years. 10 episodes each season except for that last one, which was 15 episodes that was split in parts and released over the course of a year or so. There's a lot of epic. It's late. A lot of epicness. So Cobra Kai originally came out in 2018, 34 years after the original Karate Kid. And it ended up running until this year, 2025, which is just wild to me. So it follows Johnny Lawrence as you see more of his journey and what happened after the events of Karate Kid, and how he gets back into martial arts on that larger level and reopens Cobra Kai, starting with Miguel, like is his first student there, and then like rapidly expanding and becoming just like a mammoth of a thing, but we'll get to it. So one of the big parts of the show and parts of Karate Kid in general is the idea of fighting, and also like what that means to different people throughout the universe. And the idea is, right, like you're trying to avoid damage while trying to dish it out, or at least incapacitate your opponent. Did I say component? I meant opponent. Again, it's late, but we're rolling with this. I'm hyped. Um, so yeah, that's the big thing, and it's like it's an inherently mathematical idea for several reasons. There's just the idea of you're trying to protect your health, right? You're trying to stay at like 100%, or that idea. Well, like trying to take your opponent down, or just make sure they can't do damage to you. But no matter how you cut it, it's math, and then it's like specifically it's math in motion, right? Because there's not only math in that idea of what's happening with damage, and I realize that I'm making this sound like a video game, and I am okay with that. It cuts both ways though, right? Like so anyway. I swear I'm not on anything. I'm just really psyched. I enjoyed the sixth season. I thought like season five ended on a really high note. So it's like, well, how are they going to top themselves? But like they managed to every season, so it's like it's pretty crazy. And I'm also really tired, while also being pumped. Okay, so back to what I was saying though, right? You have that idea of either dishing out damage or incapacitating your component opponent, so they don't dish out damage to you. Um, so there's that, right? And then just like protecting your health. But then there's like not only math in that basic idea, but there's math in the motions that are happening, right? There's math in you hitting your opponent and them hitting you, or you anticipating their movements and they're anticipating yours. There's math in every motion, every hit, and what that's doing, right? There's math in anticipation, right? You're going back and forth. You're acting and reacting, and you're doing it fluidly, ideally, right? And so you have this basic idea, but you have so many different approaches to it. And like the big focus that we see throughout the show, especially is it went on, is that there's not just one way to practice martial arts. There's not even just one way to practice karate, right? And we see that. And we see Cobra Kai being focused more on the offense, right? but there are flaws in that. If you're out there fighting, you're going to meet people who are fast and strong, maybe as much as you, maybe more so. You have to be able to block, you have to be able to evade, you have to be able to take a hit if need be. You have to be able to let your opponent come to you sometimes. And there's math in that. Math in reading your opponent, math in taking a hit, math in evading a hit. Math across the board. It's a beautiful thing. And then we see that, not only are there flaws to, like Cobra Kai and that offensive, approach to it, but there's also advantages to that too. But that balance of defense is needed. And we see the flip side of that with Miyagi, though, right? Which, is centered around defense, which we just explained why that's good. But sometimes you do need to strike first. Right? You do need to do something with that defense because you can block, you can evade all day, but then at some point you have to switch to defense to be effective. Or like I said, sometimes you have to strike first or have to strike harder. You have to have both a good offense and defense, and we see these principles play out with the rivalry from Johnny and Daniel over the course of Cobra Kai, and really from the past, right? Because there's a lot. Um, with what happened in Karate Kid that impacts the show and how everything expands. And I think that's utterly fascinating. And by the end of it, it's like, hey, Johnny still has his strengths and his approach. Daniel still has his, but they've mixed, they've matched. They recommend that people learn good offense and defensive capabilities, and that you can't just do one style. Or rather, you don't have to do just one style to be good. In fact, learning more is better. And I think that's all cool because again, it comes down to that idea of like dishing out damage while trying to not take it, or at the very least, if you're not going to dish out the damage, then incapacitating your opponent so that they don't, you know, dish out that damage to you. It still amounts to the same thing, right? Trying to protect your health while trying to avoid the damage. I don't know. It's late. But that was my big point though, right? Like you have that general conceit, um, where you're having this interplay of damage, but there are layers to it. And then not only is there math in these basic ideas, but right, there's math in every combo that you do or every combo that you break, right? There's math not only in the fighting on that base level, but there's math in a competitive sense, right? Because if you go in there, right, like maybe you're faster and stronger than someone, or maybe you can like find some good openings, but you hit in the wrong spot, it's not a point. You hit in the really wrong spot, and it may count against you, right? And so if you're playing in that system where you have points, you have to be careful, right? Because at that point, you're not only anticipating your opponents while trying to, get ahead. You're not only like, doing that balance between offense and defense, but you're keeping a stock of the arena. You're trying to not lose points. You're trying to gain them, right? So you're keeping track of all that. Um, and then like with a say Kai Taikai, like that big world karate championship that we see in the sixth season, like there's a point where you have like the semifinals and the finals, and their whole thing was like it was unlimited scoring, and you get a point per hit. 10 points if you knock someone down, and if they're down for 10 seconds, it's a knockout, and you get 20 points. And you were looking at not only the semifinals and the finals, but like all the competitions where you have the whole teams competing to like get to the total points. But we'll get to that a little later. But it was just like saying that hey, you could have a traditional 3-point system, like we see in a good deal of the fights, or you could have that larger thing. Um, but that's not the only type of fights that we see, right? Because we also see like brawls, and we'll get to that because I want to talk about how I feel about those. But like those are crazy because you have all the basic things that you said about fighting, but you're also considering a lot of things with your environment and maybe using that against your opponents, or you want to be careful of them using it against you, right? But yeah, so there's that big idea that you're dishing out damage, you're trying to not take it. There's math in every motion that you take. There's math in the training to get to that point. And when you're training, you're doing that conditioning, but it's good that you have someone to spar with too, because you won't be as stagnant. You won't be as in one place. You'll be going against someone else with skills that are either on your caliber, most likely, or higher. Just saying, right? And we see our characters throughout Cobra Kai, training and going back and forth with one another, and it's just cool. And then, like, from a more meta standpoint, right? Like, you have the idea that yes, we're seeing these fights and we're seeing how these characters are reacting in a situation, and they're all like doing the math, so to speak, right? But it's choreographed, right? We have actors, we have stunt people, we have people doing crazy things with the camera, we have everyone being mindful of their surroundings. Like, hey, I have to be here, you know, at this specific spot. So it's like there's so much going on with the lighting and the sound and everything just lining up. And then, like, especially with those big brawl fights, it's like, I mean, the logistics must have been insane, and I think that's cool. And so it's like there's so many ways that this art that we're seeing comes together because math at its core, right? Math is everywhere in everything, and it shows up in some just fascinating ways. In the academic sense, right? Like, it's a language, it's a problem solving tool. We use it to enhance what we already do, right? And so it's just crazy to me because, like, even when we see like a scene and someone's like messing up, right? It's intentional on a meta level, right? And I think that's cool. I think that's seriously cool. Um, and then it's like there's math in the money that it takes to produce a series like this. Math in the acting, the choices that are made, the motions that are taken, the positions that you're in at any given point, right? Math and how you say the lines, uh, and how you breathe while you're saying those lines, and how that comes across at any given moment. All of that is just math, and I think that's cool. And even on a just like crazy, like broader level, right? Like light and color, they're math, and all their properties as well. And so playing around with all that stuff to like paint a picture, to tell a tale, so to speak, I think that's great. And so for 6 seasons over the course of 7 years, they made some magic happen, and it's compelling shit. Like, you need to know if you didn't know. But even if you didn't know, you need the reminder. And even if you didn't need the reminder, I don't care. It's worth talking about. So let's talk about the series as a whole, right? Because I can go on and on and on and on, right? Just about how life shows up. And I hope though you have a good sense that it's everywhere from what I said. But while we're here, I do want to talk about just my feelings of Cobra Kai as a whole. So, like, growing up, there was a lot of things that I read and watched and played, and Karate Kid is definitely part of all of that, right? And I watched those original '80 movies, like the '80s movies, like Karate Kid, Part Two and Part Three, and then there was the next Karate Kid, which had Hilary Swank, and then eventually they came out with reboot of sorts with the Karate Kid that came out in 2010 with like Jaden Smith, which they're kind of doing a fusion soon because we'll have like Karate Kid Legends, and that's about to be a thing at the time of the recording. But Cobra Kai, it's a crazy thing, right? Because it's like I said, I grew up watching Karate Kid among other things, and so it's like I, like many people, was familiar with the franchise, and then 2018 comes along, and it's like, oh well, let's tell this story, and let's return to Johnny Lawrence and see what he's been up to, and have him restart Cobra Kai. But it's like, but they're not quite the bad guys, but then they are the bad guys, and you gotta go from there. And like, it's just interesting seeing like Johnny's journey throughout the series, but then like everyone else's, right? Because like Daniel comes back into the picture, and he seems like he's well adjusted and all that, but then seeing Johnny stirs up some things in him, and he reveals like they're more alike than they are different, and I think that's cool. I think that's interesting, and it certainly ends up being a compelling dynamic as they go on, because there's like times where they clearly hate each other and they're going at it, and then there's times where they're like, oh, well, I guess we're kind of similar. We can get along, and then it ends up being temporary, right? But it ends up being more cemented by the end of it, and I'm glad, because there were times where they were getting along for a good stretch of time, and then it's like, they're messing it up. Sometimes it was Johnny, sometimes it was Daniel, and it's like, come on, y'all work better together. But yeah, so like you had like their whole thing, like, and them being senseis, like, and that going on throughout the series, and then you had like, all of the kid characters that, like, because it was going on for so long, like a lot of them grew up over that, and you can like see that over the course of the series. So like, when Cobra Kai starts off, right, like, Johnny's not in the best place, and like, he ends up saving Miguel, who's being picked on by some bullies, and this eventually leads to him opening up Cobra Kai again, and taking Miguel under his wing, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. And early on we see that, yeah, Johnny does have a son, and he's been a deadbeat father, and eventually that does get rectified, but it takes some time. And then you see, um, Daniel, he has his kids, but maybe he's not as well connected as he could be. So he's there, but it's like, I don't know. But he gets better with that too. And like, his wife, Amanda, she remained funny throughout that series. So like, yeah, it ends up being like, pretty interesting, right? Like, and then you have Sam, and eventually you get Tori. And for the record, like, Tori just, she's the best throughout that series. Like, there's points where the writing does not do her justice, but like, she always comes back and gets better, and she like just has some of the best scenes. But again, like, there's points where they kind of bring her down. It's like, come on. But ultimately, she comes out on top, and I like that. I like that a lot. And then I liked some characters that were like introduced later on that they did get a decent amount of screen time, but maybe not as much as they could, but they got it. Like Kenny and Devin, like, they come along later. They do get some decent screen time, like more so than some of the other kids. So that's good at least. I mean, not good for the other kids, but like good for them, because those were good characters. Um, but yeah, so you have this thing where it's just like, it is a wild journey, because Johnny, he starts this, and it spirals, right, because more kids start to join his dojo, and then Kreese comes out of the woodwork, and he just starts stirring shit up. And for a while it was just like crazy, and then when you think like, okay, this is getting insane, Kreese brings in Silver into the fold. It just gets wild, right? And so, you see allegiances change left and right. You see, like, Johnny eventually leave Cobra Kai, start Eagle Fang, end up eventually joining Miyagi Do, and then there's some back and forth with him and Daniel. But like, they end up having something that works by the end. And when they have the say guy, like, God, which I don't know why that's like tough for me to say right now. But when they have that like world championship, I feel like that got interesting, because it was like, at the end of season 5, right? It's like, I mean, they ended things in a way where it's like, okay, if they never made another season, I could live with it, but I'm not gonna knock another season. And so it's just like, it was such a great way to like take it to that world stage, right? And I thought that was handled pretty well, and I like that, Tori got to be like, the champion, the girl champion, and Miguel got to be the boy champion. Because like, I felt like they both earned that. Just saying. So it was good to see them get that. And then it's just like, oh well, so when it came to like, because there was a whole thing, and they end up starting Cobra Kai again. So it ends up being Cobra Kai versus Iron Dragon, or the Iron Dragons by the end of it. And again, like, there's a whole lot that led to Cobra Kai being like open up again, right? Um, but eventually, they win, but it's not okay. There's a middle step, right? Like, Cobra Kai ties up with Iron Dragon after being like behind, and so then it ends up being up to the senseis to fight. So you have Johnny versus Wolf, and Johnny eventually wins, and I think that was a great way to go. And he wins not only because of his Cobra Kai stuff, but because of what he picks up from Miyagi, though what he picks up from Daniel. And so yeah, I like that, and that like it was just a cool just like team of rivals at a point, because it's like, yes, you have Daniel and you have Johnny working together, but like Chosen is in the mix there, and that's really cool. Right, you have some like phenomenal characters that are just like going through that, and I dig it. And it's just like I like that there's a point where in one of the competitions, Johnny was like, "Oh, we don't need math in the competition," and Devin's like, "Yes, we do. We need it to win the competition." It's like, yeah, you do. But yeah, so it's just, oh man, Cobra Kai is a hell of a ride. Like I dug it. Again, like 6 seasons over 7 years, it is wild. Like and it was doing well on YouTube. But then they got to Netflix and like it exploded, and I'm here for it. I have been here for it, and I remain here for it. Like I finished it, and it's like, yeah, I'm still here for it. If you've never watched Cobra Kai, you should do it. You should do it like right now. Just yeah, fucking go. Do it. Watch Cobra Kai. Um, yeah, so I've had a blast with it. I've had a blast making this video, and I feel like there's so many things um, that I could talk about in addition to all of it. But I need you to know, and I did say spoilers ahead at the beginning, but so leading up to like that last final fight between Johnny and Wolf, Kreese and Silver have a final showdown on Silver's boat. There's a point where um, Silver was about to fight Dirty, and so Kreese trying to stop him. He kind of stops him by like throwing a lit cigar at him, and then they get into it, and Silver can stop her hand. And at some point, they tussled, and a whole bunch of like gasoline had leaked out and everything. And so, sensing and knowing that Silver was gonna kill him, and he came there to stop him anyway. Um, he picks up the lit cigarette and he throws it at the gasoline, and then like the whole thing goes up, and like Kreese and Silver die in a fiery explosion, fighting to the death. It doesn't really super redeem Kreese because like he has done a bunch of horrible things, but it's like that's a hell of a way to go. I felt like if you didn't know that, and you never watched Cobra Kai, know that that happened, and if you did, was that not an awesome moment? But seriously, yeah, I like a lot of things that happen in Cobra Kai. Everyone had like an asshole phase, but a lot of people came together by the end, and they were just awesome. And like, there's an absurd amount of like people that came back to reprise their role. Oh, sorry, reprise their roles from previous Karate Kid products. And like I mentioned the movies like for Karate Kid, and but it's not just Cobra Kai, it's not just the movies. There was also an animated series from like the late '80s. Yeah, it was a Karate Kid cartoon. If you didn't know that, um, but yeah, just saying that it's big. So Cobra Kai is a crazy thing because it's like, hey, it's a sequel series, like a TV series. Sequels a spinoff of a massive franchise that was already pretty successful, and then it just exploded. And again, and I can't express this enough, it's fucking dope. You should go watch it. So I'll see you in the future. Professor Prime out.